Hi, everyone. My name is Eunice Yoon, and I am CNBC's Beijing Bureau Chief, as well as China correspondent. Thank you all for tuning in, especially those of you who are members of the Council, for our conversation on the global race for EVs. And we really do have the world covered, because as I just said to you, I'm here in China. And joining the discussion from the US is Scott Keogh. Scott is CEO and president of Volkswagen Group of America. He leads the Volkswagen brand in North America and heads the US operations of Audi, Bentley, among others. And Nikolaus is a senior partner with BCG's Munich office. With 25 years at BCG, Nikolaus is the founder and director for the firm's Center for Mobility Innovation. The center advises cities, car companies, and pretty much everyone else who is interested in mobility trends. Now, the point of the conversation is to make sure that your questions are answered. So please do submit them through ccga.live. Scott and Nikolaus, thank you so much for giving us the time to pick your brains about the trends in EV. So just first question, I don't think that the EV really has been the obvious choice to replace the combustion engine car. But now we're starting to see a lot of governments and car companies investing a lot into the technology. So do you think that EVs are the ones to bet on?
Yeah, Eunice, look, I think you're right. I get this question a lot. I've been in the business for over 20 years, and it's always next year, it's going to happen. I firmly believe that the breakthrough is now, and there's a couple of major reasons why. I think first and foremost, as you pointed out, global legislation is quite clear. China, Europe, America, you see where the story is going. The second one is really the big picture. If you look at Wall Street has basically said, we are going to give great shareholder value. We're going to give great to cars that have an electric future. So if you're a company that hasn't positioned yourself as an electric future, your stock is going nowhere. The third biggest reason, honestly, is the invest. And once these big GMs, Ford, Volkswagen, all these companies get these invests, factories get built, products come, that machine just doesn't get turned off. I think the more important reasons, though, honestly, are one, you see as well as I do, the environment clearly is without a doubt struggling. Whether you're a farmer, whether you're a fisherman, wherever you live, the impacts of climate change is irrefutable and undeniable. And I think the final reason is the tech is cool, the cars is cool, and the biggest test I have in the automotive business, as big and complex it is what I call the school drop-off test. And it's when you take your kids, you can usually see how car brands are doing by what parents are driving. 3 years ago, 0 electric cars. 2 years ago, 1 or 2. Just dropping my kids off this morning, easily 20% electric vehicles. So it's definitely coming. Wall Street, environment, scaling, consumer desire. So yeah, I think the moment's here, big time.
Scott, I love that test. Nikolaus, what do you think? Do you think we're at a turning point?
Yes, I think we are at a turning point. And I concur with Scott. I think we have been in the industry for the last 20 years saying, oh, it'll happen next year. And I think we have reached inflection point. And maybe just sharing a few studies we have just now concluded at a global scale. I think if we talk about global scale, we're not talking about Scott's school morning, but we're talking about global scale. So really including also the rest of the world and Europe and China, we will be 1 out of 3 cars battery electric vehicles, so pure battery electric vehicles in 2030 and 1 out of 2 by 2035. Yeah, so I think at a global scale, we'll talk about regional differences in a second. And I just concur. I think it's very clearly the governments who are pushing this. You know that we have 15 countries that are banning fossil fuel cars in 2040. Yeah, Norway as early as 2025. Others 2030, California, Canada 2040. So I think this is very important. I think we have also a big push through COVID. You know, here in Europe, everyone was puzzled last year when the EU gave out a stimulus package only for EVs. Everyone said, wow, how can that happen? And I think that's also driving it. And we have 400 new EV models in the next 5 years coming on the market. And last but not least, we have also to say that on the cost basis, batteries are getting less and less costly. So it's not only a fan factor, it's also commercially viable.
Well, we definitely like the micro data points as well as the macro data points. And then to get more into the topic that you're talking about, the whole kind of the national competitiveness of it all, or the regions. I mean, we do see the US, EU, China, all kind of racing in, wanting to be global manufacturing sectors when it comes to EVs. How do you see this playing out? Do you think it's actually going to happen, or is one region going to have an edge?
Well, Eunice, the interesting thing is we have been looking at the markets and we've projected the markets. Now, if we take the three markets you highlighted, yeah, and I come just with three data points, and then we'll talk about funnier things. But it's actually interesting that the markets are not so far apart. Yeah, going into 2035. We foresee EU being at 62% battery electric vehicles. Yeah, so almost 2/3 battery electric vehicle. China is at 58%. US is at 54%. So, you know, between 54 and 62 is 8 percentage points. That's kind of a statistical difference. So what I want to say is there is, I think, a clear trend that all three major regions will be far above 50, namely 60% of pure battery electric vehicles. And that does not include plug-in hybrids and mild hybrids, which will come on top of it. So for me, I think it's a global race with also very different players. I think in China, we have a lot of startups, but also incumbents. In Europe, we have seen a big shift, I would say, of all the big players towards electric vehicle. You could see it at the IAA Mobility last week in Munich, where from the ID. Life of Volkswagen to the Megane E-Tech from Renault, a lot of European players have switched, and the US is similar. And I'm sure Scott can elaborate on that much better than me.
Oh, well, yeah, one other question. Yeah, go ahead, Scott. Go ahead first.
Please, no, go ahead. Go ahead, you.
No, I was just going to, just because Nikolaus, I found the numbers really interesting, especially because, you know, sitting here in China, all I do is hear about how much Beijing has been pouring investment and creating policies to try to almost get China to have a head start compared to other regions. And I was curious about what you feel, if you think that all of that money has been able to help China get a little bit ahead in the global competition and maybe create global champions. What do you guys think?
Well, I think what we have seen in China is, of course, an emergence of many, I would say, EV startups. Yeah, and obviously you have many around, and the infrastructure has also been pushed quite a bit. But let's also be clear that the other regions in the world have really, I think, been closely following. Yeah, and again, if you take the Green Deal of the European Union that Ursula von der Leyen has mentioned last year, I think we clearly see that Europe is pushing that, US similarly. So I don't see such an uneven playing field.
Mm. So Eunice,
maybe from my perspective, I think a couple of things. One, and maybe I'm the utopian Pied Piper here, but the crucial thing, I think, yes, there's all this competition, but I think first and foremost, what consumers want is a great product. That's what they're going to get. The second thing is what the environment needs, and there's only one environment. So the fact, I believe strongly, we have to be unified around these things, from China to North America to Europe. There's one air we breathe, and so on and so forth. The second thing is global scale. In order to make it work on the corporation side, you can't just be successful in one of these markets. I think one of Volkswagen's great strengths, if you look at the ID.4, we have that localized in 5 factories. We will be making this in all 3 regions. So that gives us the scale, obviously, to be competitive. But the final point I want to make is the decision makers, I believe, won't be government. I am always someone who's cognizant that you have to sell a car to a consumer. And a consumer does not walk into a showroom and say, I want to help this company reach their environmental regulations. They don't walk into a dealership and say, I'm going to do this for Biden or this for Trump or this whatever. They buy a great car at a great price with great tech. And I think that's what's going to allow electrification to win. It is great car, great price, great tech, but it has to come from the consumer. Legislation cannot force the hands of how a consumer will spend money, in my opinion.
Scott, I love how you are saying, no, VW is the one that has all the great car technology, because one of the things that I get a lot in covering this industry is that you kind of see the two parts of the industry kind of sniffing at each other, where I'll talk to the tech guys and they'll say, oh, those metal bashers, they don't know what they're talking about, those old fogies, right? And then you talk to the traditional car makers and they're always saying, no, hey, we actually have technology and you guys aren't that smart. So who's got it right? And how is that going to affect the way the industry develops?
I think the first thing, who has it right? Obviously, we have it right. I'm with Volkswagen. Of course, we have it right. No, I'm not biased at all. I think the most important thing is, particularly for everyone on the line, there couldn't be a better time to be in the automotive business. I think the automotive business is moving from, as you point, the guy in the suit with the Rolex and dealers and on, into this high-tech, cool world that's looking at electrification, looking at autonomous, looking at software stacks. There's never been a time to be in the automotive business. And I think what you said is going to be half true on both sides. We're going to get smarter and better with software, more leaner and more nimble. And I think the tech companies are going to learn some painful truths that it's not so easy gluing together a car with legislation, with airbags, with safety. But to me, it's awesome opportunity for the consumer, and it's a great opportunity for us to get more competitive and to get better. So we welcome all of it, wherever they may come from. Absolutely.
Well, going a little bit more into consumers, I have a bunch of questions that are already coming through. Priya in London asks, what's next? Oh, no. First, Priya, I'm going to get back to you. In terms of consumer questions, Ian from Austin, Texas asks, what is the most cost-efficient EV on the market?
Since it's Austin, Texas, and that's a great city, and we're in America, so I'll speak for that one. The honest answer is the ID4, and I'll tell you exactly why. I think first and foremost, you need a car that has the right package and right size. I think you've seen a lot of the early cars have been sort of more Euro city type of cars. I think the second thing we look at is how much range can you get for the price. That price range equation is crucial. And if you look at an ID4, you get a entry level SUV. The car goes out the door with incentives at $35,000, $34,000, and on top of that, not to be too promotionally, you have free charging. So without a doubt, and the press has reported on this, this is the story of value. And by the way, it's the most important thing with electrification. You're not going to get adoption if we don't get pricing down. But Austin, Texas, that's my answer.
No, I think what is important, Eunice, if I may just add here, is what we will see actually is we will see the cost effectiveness of many EVs increasing in the years to come. Yeah, as I just mentioned before, the battery cost goes down. You go into models of subscription, charging might be included, and things like this. So I think that one of the inflection points is that by 2022, the battery electric vehicle will be more cost effective than a combustion engine. And that's a problem.
Nicholas,
yeah. Nicholas, just to add on that one, because the point a lot of people aren't making is what makes the ICEs work is they're so tremendously scaled. But of course, as their volumes go down, they'll be getting descaled each and every year. The second thing, of course, the cost of keeping an ICE on the market to meet the regulations, catalytic converters, raw materials, all the homologation, it's actually going to work the other way. ICEs are going to get dramatically more expensive to put on the market. And EVs, as Nicholas clearly pointed out, are going to get less expensive. And that tip is happening as we speak. And then it's going to steamroll once it gets rolling.
And just building on that, just a second, Eunice, I will coming to your consumer, but I just want to build on what Scott said. What I think is interesting to see is that the industry has moved from the incumbents or the traditional OEMs here and the tech players here to moving towards a common playground. Yeah. And I think that's where scale plays a big role, Scott, as you said. I think but where tech plays a big role. And I think what we see nicely is the merger of scale advantage, which I think traditional OEMs have because they're producing 5 or 10 million cars, and tech advantage, which I think the tech players have. And this merger has, I think, driven a lot of this inflection point, which we see in the last, I would say, couple of years. So
Nikolaus, just following up on that, because Priya in London did ask, what is next for innovation to electric vehicles?
Well, there are many innovations, both I think in terms of the battery development, battery cost, solid state battery and things like this. But we will also obviously then have more advanced elements on the charging infrastructure. I think I deeply believe that it's not only about adding charging points, but the ease of charging, the possibility wherever you are on the world, not only in the US and not only in Germany, but the possibility to locate charging points, to reserve charging time, I think, will be very important. And then in the car itself, and I know this has nothing to do with electrification, but it's close to my heart, you have all the connected car services that will become more and more important, like point of interest search. If you like to golf, you find the golf place. If you like to go to the cinema, if you like to do other stuff, I think you have the possibility to do that. And which I think will be the next big frontier is really autonomous driving. And it will start with assisted driving and it will go to autonomous driving. And well, I tell you, that will be, I think, one of the big changes. But I'm sure they're all in the pipeline at VW. So Scott, you might.
Yeah, no, Nicholas, I think you nailed it. The fanatical focus needs to be on the battery. I think we want to get the battery more efficient, less cost, less raw materials, obviously significantly smaller and more compact. And my simple thing is this: we've spent 100 years refining the internal combustion engine, 120 years. We've barely just gotten started with the battery. So I think there's a ton of innovation, and we have a lot of investments in solid state and quantum scape. You know that story. And I think the second big frontier is, of course, autonomous, and we can talk further about it. But what we are fanatical about, the average transaction price of a US car is somewhere to a tune of $33,000, $34,000. Most EV announcements are dancing in the place of $70,000, $80,000. All these pickup trucks, $85,000. The key for us is to get the cost down so we can get adoption. That's the only way to drive the systemic reduction of CO2. So that's what we're focused on, and we've taken some good first step towards that. But the battery is going to be the frontier.
Well, you're talking about being a fanatic. I just think that the car industry feels like it's been a fanatic. It's been kind of racing ahead and almost getting ahead of the infrastructure and the supply chain. So I was wondering how you both felt if you would see that the infrastructure and the supply chain could actually hold back and that they're lagging the development of the industry. And then how do you get around that? What do you do?
Yeah, maybe two things from my side. I think in terms of the infrastructure, there is a little bit of myths with charging. I think obviously there needs to be continued investment in the supercharging networks. Consumers need it, particularly in inner cities. But if you look at most of these networks, even the big ones, single points out in California, the network is being utilized maybe 15, 16%. Most of these networks are being utilized at 3 to 4%. So that tells me there's a lot more charging that can be done. And what that also tells me is a little bit of a myth buildup that says, okay, I need a supercharger at every block in America. Once you drive an electric car, you get the fundamentals. You don't need as much charging as what's in your head, particularly if you're charging at home. In terms of, let's say, as you say, the infrastructure and network, obviously there's a lot of things merging right here. You see what's happening with semiconductors, and that's a shortage on top of electrification. So yeah, I think it's going to be at least another year for these things to sort themselves out. But I will be an optimist on this. The market globally does respond to challenges. It does, whether it's through capital, whether it's through technology, whether it's through more investment. So I think these are temporary. They will be sorted out. I do not view them at all as systemic.
Yeah.
Another follow-up question on, go ahead, Nikolaus.
No, maybe just one point to add to Scott, just to give, we did an analysis about how many vehicles today, BEVs, we have per charging point in Europe or in China, and it's actually 5 BEVs per charging point. Yeah. So if you imagine a charging point is available 24 hours and you have 5 BEVs, well, that reflects the underutilization. In US, it's 9 BEVs, but it's still not enough. We have to get to 20 BEVs per charging point, and then it would be more or less utilized. So we are at 1/4 of capacity, and I think there will be a parallel development of utilization and number of charge points.
One follow-up question on infrastructure. Rhonda Burt asks, how do you see EVs impacting less developed countries, especially with lackluster infrastructure and more rural areas?
Yeah. Well, maybe I take this one. Having worked also in countries such as India, for example, in Russia. And so the first thing is that many of these emerging markets are actually giving themselves a very clear EV policy. And I think, as you rightfully said, Scott, there's only one air to breathe. And so it has to be a global impact. But I think what we see in these markets is that cities are pushing massively the loading infrastructure, charging infrastructure. But at the same time, we are also aware that there will be regions in the world where in the 2030s and 2040s, we still need combustion engine because of the lack of charging infrastructure, because of climatic situations. Making an EV run at minus 40 degrees Celsius in Siberia will be a challenge. So I think we have to be aware that there will be a staggered rollout of EVs around the world, and emerging markets, and some emerging markets, especially rural areas, will be later than big cities in the US. That's a reality we have to face.
But Eunice, it's an important question. You can see where this is going. And my fear and our fear is you create this two-world state where it says, okay, the haves will be investing in this and doing all this, and the have-nots, you keep that old technology, you keep actually even worse technology. If you look at combustion systems, exhaust systems, what's emitting from these things. So I think this has to be a profound focus of companies, of governments, of everything. You have a reset right now, and it's a chance of a lifetime at this reset, that it's a global reset, not a haves and a have-not reset. And again, I come back to it, the best way to make this happen is to get the affordability index down. If you can get the pricing right, I believe strongly, you can get the adoptability in markets like Mexico, which I'm responsible for, and South America, and even India. But it can't be a two-class system. Irrefutably cannot.
Yeah, no, I think the end stage must be a system where everyone has a possibility to have electric vehicle and electric infrastructure. And by the way, I think, Scott, one way would be to really use also our supranational organizations, whatever it is, UN, Development Bank, and stuff like this, to kind of favorably invest into charging infrastructure in those countries.
I've got one skeptic in, well, maybe more, but at least one that's actually asking the question.
There's more than one for sure.
It's always fun to have skeptics.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about bringing the prices down and everything, but as a consumer, Sam in New York asks, thinking about buying an EV, but is this a fad? Like, are we going to ditch them for hydrogen-powered cars in 10 years?
Well, since I'm a New Yorker, and I'm a New Yorker before I moved to Virginia, I'll have to answer Sam's question. Fair is fair. And certainly after the Giants' performance yesterday, it's tough to be a New Yorker. Yes, Sam, I don't see it as a fad for all the reasons I laid out. I think hydrogen, provocative and very cool. And from a pure technical perspective, perhaps. But again, infrastructure. I mean, the globe has made its bet on electrification. Companies are following, consumers are following. I do see it, and I think it's realistic. I think one of the things you raised, which you haven't raised, is, of course, we haven't really solved how to make this work in inner cities. Whether it's Chicago, San Fran, or New York, charging is dramatically harder there. Now, most of American automotive business is in the suburbs. Most suburbs have a garage, significantly easier. That's the big challenge that needs to be worked out in inner cities. But no, definitely not a fad. I think it'll be 40% of the US car market by 2030. 40% of 17, 18 million cars is definitely not a fad.
Yeah, and maybe just, if I may just build on the hydrogen story, because obviously you have regions in the world that are betting on hydrogen, Japan, Korea, where we have seen a bit a stronger push on this. But as I think Scott rightfully said, I think technically it's a very fascinating solution, but in passenger cars, I think it's not really feasible, not only from the infrastructure, but also from the whole setup. We will see hydrogen probably in trucks. We will see it probably in trains. We will probably see it in ships, but the traditional passenger car is not the right setup for hydrogen. So again, I can just concur with the fact that we will have EVs as the solution of choice for the decades to come.
I've got another challenge that you guys are going to have to find a solution for. So Michelle Lee from Chicago asks, as a wheelchair user, are there any plans for wheelchair accessible EVs that won't be too expensive? So we got the infrastructure in the question, the technology, and the cost.
Yeah, no, oh, sorry, go ahead, Nikolaus, you go.
Scott, please go ahead.
No, Nikolaus, please.
No, I think this is a very interesting question. And just last week, we were talking at ERR about the social inclusion of mobility. Yeah, and I think this is something which plays an important role. We are just running a big project with the World Economic Forum on this. And I think having vehicles that are adapted to handicapped people, I think plays an important role. So I think this is a topic which has less to do with electric vehicle, but has to do, from my point of view, to do with what kind of social community solutions we have. And I know that Los Angeles is, for example, a city that has wheelchair adapted vehicles available for for transportation. We have in Japan, we have now already running autonomous shuttles that bring elderly people and young people in wheelchairs to medical appointments. So I think this is where public and private needs to work together to use this new technology, be it electric, be it autonomous, to make those parts of our society more mobile than the traditional car we have today.
Yeah, and I concur with Nikolaus. I just coming back from Munich, like him, and looking at a business that we have running in Hamburg, Moya.
Oh, yeah.
And if you look at the, let's say, carpooling, this is exactly some of the solutions that you can put on the table. You can really open up mobility for all. And then when you get autonomous, it takes that to a whole other level. You know, now you have situations, obviously, with handicap. You have situations with people before they can drive, even the elderly, who no longer now will have reduced mobility choices. So I think that is the chance of a lifetime. So it moves beyond electric. But to the point in Chicago, I concur. It just can't be these types of cars, $80,000 that work for a certain segment of the population. Then we're missing this global chance.
So Aaron Masliansky from Chicago asks about another segment of the population, saying, why can't we make electric school buses? They don't have to drive that far and typically burn diesel now.
Well, on the school buses or on the application in buses, I think you're absolutely right. There are already electric buses, and typically buses that are running on predefined routes are the dream for electric charging, because you have the so-called depot charging. The bus is in the morning in the depot, it's in the evening in the depot, or even you can put a charger at the beginning or at the end of the route. So whether it's school buses or regular municipal buses, I think this is one of the applications, and we see many offers coming there from there. So this is a segment easily to be electrified. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with Nikolaus. I think this is coming. This is coming. I think the physics is a little rough. Obviously, big buses, heavy batteries, but it couldn't be a more perfect application. You have very fixed routes, very fixed time to charging. You have what I call a lot of knowns, and that's a perfect application for electric. So these solutions will be coming.
So let's say the industry pulls it all off and we end up with EV as the leader, jumping over combustion engines. Kelhan from Chicago asks, so what is the ecological impact so he says, what ecological impact must be considered when developing EV battery technology? What will happen to all of these batteries?
Scott, do you want to take?
I can speak from our side. Nikolaus, do you want to go? And then I'll tell you what we're up to. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think what we see in the industry overall is that we are moving more and more to really circular economy. And again, I'm coming back to this IAA mobility motor show last year in Munich, where we saw that the circularity of components is very important. It's not only about batteries. Yes, I think we need to recycle batteries, but we also need to recycle tires. We need to look at how we can recycle leather, or how we can work on leather in a more sustainable way. So I think overall, cars are being designed today for circularity. And we have really leaders in that field. And I think from that perspective, getting these batteries back, and then of course recycling them, and kind of getting the kind of materials out, and really doing the optimum in this circular approach is key, absolutely key. But I just want to underline, it's not only the battery. There are many components in the cars that get really kind of reutilized in a sustainable way.
Yeah, and Eunice, maybe two things. I think a lot of people have this perspective: the now state is nearly perfect, and then the EV state has all these issues with batteries. And I think, look, I've traveled to Ecuador, I've been to Venezuela, I've been to the Gulf of Mexico. So we've all seen when oil comes out of the ground, and we've all seen fracking. So this is not exactly what I would call a beautiful state by any stretch of the imagination. And then the emissions coming out of the tailpipe, we all know quite well what that is. So the question is, can we make it dramatically better? And from tailpipe emissions, 100%, yes, we can. And I think to Nikolaus's point, I agree, but certainly the action is on the battery. And to me, that's two fronts. One, The automotive life of the battery, I think, is easily going to go 10 years and beyond. But the battery is still going to have a functionality of probably 70%. So that offers tons of applications. And we've seen it again, whether it can take a home generator or it can be at these Electrify American charging stations. So you have these applications that will give the battery a lot of life. I think the second thing is recycling. So obviously shred the core components, put them back into the industrial cycle. The second thing, if you look at the sludge, or let's say the rare earth materials, again, back to the 360 that Nikolaus was mentioning, this goes back to the manufacturers to make the new batteries and keep the circle going. So we see an opportunity here. This is something we anticipate we will fully execute without a doubt. I certainly anticipate without a doubt the government's going to mandate this quite shortly. And look, like any new application, new technology, we need to find the solutions. The other thing is the battery themselves. We want to have future batteries that have less rare earth materials, less raw materials, more solid state, and the things that Nikolaus was mentioning earlier. But all these solutions are not there, but it doesn't mean you don't take the first step on the journey if all the solutions are not there. You commit, and then you continue to fanatically execute, in my opinion.
Do you think that the transition to EVs could change the way people actually use cars and how they relate to cars? And I was thinking about, will you even want to own a car? Of course, there are a lot of people who love the freedom of driving a car, but then maybe there's other people who would just say, I'd rather just have a subscription to a car, or something like that. I mean, what do you see business models changing and new opportunities opening up?
Yes. Maybe I'll start on, so yes, I definitely think, and we just published an article on subscriptions, and I know that the start of subscription hasn't been so successful, especially in the US, but now I think we have in Europe, for example, a very clear view that 15 to 20% of cars in 10 years will be subscription based. And this is a mixture of new startups coming into the market and obviously established OEMs. And I think just Volkswagen announced the so-called Auto-Abo in German, which is a subscription model a few weeks ago. So I think there will be a new way of ownership. The only thing I'm a bit doubtful is that people will, I think there will still be the wish to use a car long term, whether it's leased, whether it's financed, whether it's subscribed. But I think there is a large chunk of the population that will want to use a car long term instead of just having car sharing or calling an Uber or something like this. So for our perspective, I think there is a continued demand for individual mobility in a vehicle that you are associated with, whether it's, again, subscribed, leased, financed, or owned.
Yeah, Eunice, I agree with Nikolaus. We have taken a lot of look at these, and we know philosophically, we hear the experts say, wow, what a chance for utilization. You have these fleets, cars are only being used 90% of the time or 10% of the time, depending on the owner. But the truth is, when you look at the facts, particularly now with COVID, most Americans want to have their own car and their own independent transportation, full stop. Do I think that closes the door on better utilization models that you can look at service loaners, look at rental cars, look at subscription? 100%. And I think Nikolaus is probably right. I could see that becoming, let's say, 15 points of the market sometime in, let's say, the mid-term to longer term. But right now, and I'd say in the next couple of years, without a doubt, Americans do want independent, personal, I own it transportation. And owning could be different, whether you obviously lease or whatever it is, but they want to have their own car. And that's clearly what we see. And we think that's going to hold at least through the midterm.
So question this is not coming from the audience, but it is for the audience, because I'm wondering what kind of career advice you might want to give to somebody who's starting out in their career, kind of wondering, should I get on the ground floor of this industry? Where should I go? Which region might be the best, or what sector? What kind of skills should I cultivate? Any advice?
Scott, do you want
Look, I can speak firsthand. I wasn't someone who was, let's say, raised in the automotive business. I was a young kid in New York City and got an opportunity to get a job up in New Jersey for Mercedes-Benz at the time. And I said to myself, I'll put Mercedes-Benz on my resume. I'll work there for 1 year, and then I'll go back to doing what I wanted to do. And I fell in love with the business. I got a chance to travel the world. I got a chance to work around the world. I got a chance to join an industry that's fundamentally changing, and I loved it. So my advice is take the leap. I can guarantee you there's never been a better time to be in the automotive business. The world is happening here. innovation, technology, consumer adoption, climate change, government regulations. There's no industry that has it on an industrial scale. I think the other thing I love about the industry, it's an industry people care about and talk about. You can do a lot of things in life, but no one's going to get out of bed in the morning and say, wow, how's that new deodorant you're working on going? Or I can't wait to try your new deodorant or your new socks or your new whatever it is. Automotive business, people talk about it, people care, and it's fun. It's the intersection of almost everything in American and global life now. So I've grown to love it, and I highly recommend jumping in. We need the best minds, the best talent, the best dreamers to make the industry even better, and that's what we're looking for.
Yeah, and just building on that, I think taking the word of a dreamer, when I joined BCG in the mid-90s, we were doing projects for the automotive industry around dealer network optimization and factory layout. I thought I would have dreamed back then if I would have told you that today we're working on autonomous shuttles, we're working on connectivity, we're working on cities, how to make multimodal trips really work. And that's why I think also we at BCG have been pushing this mobility innovation, which is truly, I would say, intermodal and cross-sectorial. And it's a pleasure to work with car OEMs like the one Scott is leading, as it is to work with cities such as Singapore or Boston, who are basically redefining the mobility of the future. So I can just also encourage everyone to look at that industry going forward.
So we only have a couple more seconds, but I'm going to throw in this last question. Who will win the global race? What region? One word answer.
First and foremost, the world will win. Honestly, the planet will win and the consumer will win because they're going to drive a damn cool car. If you press me, of course, Volkswagen Group worldwide, absolutely. But the planet and the consumer will truly win, and I mean that sincerely.
Yeah, I think
I'm biased.
But the end consumer will win. And I think, as I told you at the beginning, Eunice, it's too close to call it a race. So it's not diplomatic answer, but it's really our view that all the big regions will be around the 60%.
Well, the time moved really fast, just like the EV industry. Thank you both for the time.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Eunice. Nikolaus, always a pleasure.
Scott, yes, likewise. Thank you.